Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is my very first clear of Kayon's Wrath on Master Difficulty. This clear is done in single player or solo play, and I'm using a team today of Bellina, Patya, Corinne, and Grace. And basically this took me a while to attempt. I finally got around to this on Sunday. Took about 4 or 5 hours, honestly, before I was able to really get this fight down. And compared to some of my previous solo runs, I wouldn't call this a blind attempt. I definitely seen a lot of hype around Bellina in particular, so I relatively quickly realized the hype was not just hype. I probably needed her on my team in order to take care of this. And having never really played her before, it took me a while to kind of get adjusted to her and actually be a little bit more conservative in my skills use so that I wouldn't run out of Dragon Drive as often as I just did there. So fortunately this early in the fight it really is of no consequence whether I run out of Dragon Drive. Obviously not a good thing for my DPS, but it's not going to affect my ability to clear early in the fight. It's really during phases when there's lots of buffs that Kayon applies to himself through Supreme Spheres or otherwise that you really want to have Dragon Drive active. And basically why Bellina is so good for this is every use of her first skill when she's in Dragon Drive dispels, and it only costs 25% of your Dragon Drive gauge, and your Dragon Drive gauge is kind of a renewable resource. That skill is immediately ready for use afterward, so you have lots of iframes, you're able to hit in a very wide area. You can see I'm actually attacking some of those Supreme Spheres while attacking Kayon. Now, unfortunately, in my situation, running Corinne and Patya as other melee in this comp, I'm not always going to be successful in keeping bait as far as Kayon goes. Sometimes they are going to cause him to dash toward them, Corinne in particular. But what I found was, out of the units I had built, this seemed to be the comp that had the most potential for success. Initially, I tried this using Vice as my lead since he's my preferred dagger unit, but basically once I got to that Supreme Sphere phase, I couldn't do it with Vice, and so I felt that Bellina was probably a better choice. I should take the Vice I had seen a lot in Discord and over on the Reddit and decided to try use her. Some other things I initially tried were to use ranged units, particularly Gala Cleo in the place of Corinne, and I just found it was not as consistent. She would just randomly die sometimes, and I think that was partially because she was a ranged unit. As a ranged unit, not only does she have lower defense, but she also tended to stand towards some of the orbital spears and just take damage that way. So even though Patya and Corinne can both get blinded here and thereby not do a lot of damage, one of the nice things about both of them is that they have effects that can be beneficial whether or not they're blinded. So debuffs can still hit through blind, and that means bleed and Corinne's defense down can still apply, which is nice. And in Corinne's case, I actually think that defense co-ability mattered a lot for me because I don't have Andromeda for my Bellina, who provides a really nice 100% defense buff at low HP. So having just a little bit of extra defense was pretty nice on my shields, not having Andromeda. And Corinne's co-ability, chain co-ability I should say, also gives you extra strength when your HP is below 40%, which obviously Bellina's is for the entire duration of this fight, just about. So I think he ended up being a pretty valuable team member, even though he's not able to deal as much damage as you would hope because we don't really have a consistent source of poison on the team. I brought Ronzel's shared skill as the one source of poison, but it's really not active that often, and I was pretty conservative in using it because I realized that I needed a lot of damage to break through when Kayon clenches you in his fist and holds down one unit. That weak point takes a lot of damage to break through, and so you can see it here. I basically had to use like 3 to 4 of my first skill or 3 of my first skill and 1 of that shared skill. It just really got quite tight, and even though that's something I could do with Vice in my lead slot, I don't think you could get through the Supreme Spears as well without Bellina if you're trying to solo this with other comps. So I kind of feel like she's a must-have. Grace and Patya for survivability kind of feel like must-haves as well, and Patya has the benefit that she's pretty good even when she's blinded. Obviously Grace kind of necessary to stay alive with Bellina. since you're going to take some unavoidable damage. Things get messy here. You can see that Kaiyan is able to take some of those buffs, and I'm standing far enough away that I'm not going to be able to bait him, but as long as we're able to remove all the buffs by the end of the phase, it feels relatively safe. The main sequences I'm worried about that had ended my runs a lot in the past was not having enough skills charged up to actually break through when he clenches you in his fist and free the abducted unit. And also, in some cases, I would mess up because I wouldn't necessarily leave the arena properly. So he does a screen-wide purple, I think it's called Universal Annihilation, where in my case, my defense is low enough that I really want to go outside of the battleground or the yellow circle that's inside the main part of the arena. But I think if you have Andromeda, you can just kind of do whatever. The other thing that he does sometimes is he'll fill up a purple circle on the outside and on the inside. The one on the outside seemed to drain my SP, so I wanted to be on the inside for that one. And then he does this other Universal Annihilation where it's red on the inside. So it's a little hard for me to distinguish between all these attacks. This definitely ended some of my runs in the past. Like that one there, you definitely want to be on the outside because it's just a small purple circle. But yeah, I'm just trying to be as conservative as I can. As much as I rushed toward the beginning and unloaded a lot of Renegade Dragonfalls, essentially, if you have a lot of Dragonfalls stacked up, you can force your way through some of the more difficult segments of the fight. Now, unfortunately there, we don't get the bait. We're scrambling a bit to actually get rid of some of these buffs, iframing the dashes so that we don't eat into our shields. But at this point, I feel pretty confident about this. I just know when he comes back to the center of the arena, there's some tight sequences where he gives himself buffs, but also abducts somebody and you have to break a weak point relatively quickly. Looks like here we have Universal Annihilation, and let's see what he follows this up with. I can't remember if this is where he stole away my grace or if it's later on. Alright, it looks like it's just the small purple circle there. I definitely wiped at that point in the past, not thinking to get out of that purple circle for whatever reason, just blanking on that. So I was happy to get through this point. And just in general, during these phases of swipes, I had wiped in the past just because an AI would randomly die, like maybe it had a little bit of shields left to where Grace didn't cast a full shield for them, and then they would die, maybe get stuck on the orbs and not get out of the center part of the arena. Yeah, this Universal Annihilation is where you want to run out. You can see there Curran took a hit, and in past runs, things like that could have potentially killed. Luckily, he didn't die there, but now we immediately have to get ready for Crushing Cataclysm, what I had referred to as Kaiyan locking you in his fist earlier. And we got through it, but I got a little worried there and a little bit not gun shy, triggered happy, I guess, and used another first skill when I probably didn't have to, and actually got myself out of my special Dragon Drive form. And unfortunately I did the same there as a means of iframing. Luckily we're able to bait to the wall, and I'm holding my first skill because I want my first skill to be ready to use once I activate Dragon Drive so I can dispel any potential buffs. But at this point of the fight I was very nervous to have this end in a failure. Once he got regen stacks, I was really afraid that things were going to go badly for us here. And essentially, my main focus is trying to build up Dragon Drive gauge while eliminating the buffs when possible. But it's very scary. Anything that goes wrong in this fight can lead to a wipe, in my opinion. If your Dispeller dies or you get to a period where nobody on your team can Dispel, it's just so hard to build up SP and just do anything. And eventually I realized that his shields have like 2 stacks of charges as far as buffs go. They'll come back. It took me a while to actually get the hang of that, since I think my Grace was automatically dispelling them for me and I didn't notice for a while. But basically, that's pretty much it. Got to the end of the fight. It felt pretty similar throughout. There weren't a lot of new mechanics. It just feels a much bigger HP check and DPS check, I guess. It's just more of a slog. Like, to break the hand is really hard. The Crushing Cataclysm, it takes a lot of damage. It's probably easier in co-op, but I did find it to be pretty challenging. And just in general, Kaiyan just feels like such a beast. He has so much HP and health. that it takes a really long time to whittle him down. But in the end, this team comp worked out. Switching to Bellina definitely did the trick for me. It wasn't completely smooth. There were runs where one of the AI would die midway through, or I would overextend myself and lose Dragon Drive. Especially during break, you can have a temptation to accidentally fall out of Dragon Drive, but then all of a sudden you have to deal with a lot of Supreme Spears. So by doing a more conservative route, I think it worked out fine for me. It took me over 9 minutes to get my first clear, but the good news is I don't think co-op clears should take that long. I'll show off my team here. Obviously no tier 2 weapons since I hadn't cleared this beforehand, but I do think that the team synergy worked out really nicely here with Bellina's Chain Co ability giving us some extra light resistance, Patia providing HP, Curran providing defense and strength at low HP, and then Grace, of course, just doing what Graces want to do. Let me know what y'all thought about Master Kayan in the comments below. I'm very curious about what you think the co-op experience has been like. Otherwise, everyone, that is going to do it for this video. So, thank you as always for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.